You walk through life like most do, upright, breathing, smiling when needed. You speak when spoken to, you perform the rituals, and yet, inside, there is something still. Something heavy, something quiet, not dramatic, not loud, just always there. A quiet despair. It isn't a scream, it isn't a panic. It has a murmur behind your thoughts, a shadow beneath every joy, a strange silence that settles in even when you laugh, even when everything seems fine. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this before anyone dared to say it out loud. He didn't believe in the stories of happiness we sell each other. To him, suffering wasn't a mistake. It was the starting point, the background noise of existence, the very heartbeat of life. We weren't born into joy, we were born into a will, blind, unconscious, and unstoppable. Life does not ask why, it moves forward, like a wave, like a hunger. And we, as its passengers, are swept along. We make plans, build futures, love, lose, hope, but underneath it all, something stirs that we cannot control. That is the will, Schopenhauer said. Not as a choice, but as a force. It lives inside your bones, it pulls you from within, it makes you desire, it makes you ache, it makes you chase things that vanish as soon as you reach them. He called it the will to life, not the will of reason, not the will of the mind, but a primal scream embedded deep inside every creature. A force that makes the bird fly, the lion hunt, the child cry, and the adult keep going, even when they don't know why. And that force, it doesn't rest, it doesn't stop when you're tired, it doesn't care when you're lost. It keeps pushing, feeding on every hope you invent. And every time you reach for something, love, success, peace, it moves the goalpost. The moment you touch it, it has already gone. This is why your despair is quiet. Because it is not a reaction to a single tragedy. It is not about one moment, it is about the realization that this is the structure. That the chase never ends, that the thirst was never yours. It was programmed. Picture this. A man stands in the center of a celebration. People laugh around him, the lights are warm, music plays, glasses clink. But inside him, it is winter, nothing touches, nothing sinks in. That man isn't broken, he is awake, because the moment you see the truth, the moment you stop pretending, a strange silence settles in, the kind that doesn't ask for help, the kind that doesn't scream, a noble silence, the kind that knows, there is no way out, only a way through. Schopenhauer didn't tell you this to make you suffer. He said it because truth is cleaner than illusion. The world may be full of pleasures, but they are stitched into pain. For every joy, there is loss, for every gain, the shadow of decay. Everything you love will vanish, or you will vanish before it. But this isn't a call to despair, it is a call to clarity. To stand still in the storm and see it for what it is, not to fix it, not to escape it, but to know, you are not weak for feeling this. You are not broken because your soul feels heavy. You are simply awake in a world that was never designed for comfort. The quiet despair, that thing beneath your chest, is not your enemy. It is your mirror. It shows you the part of yourself that can no longer live inside lies. It reveals what no motivational speech dares to say, that peace isn't found in chasing more, but in stopping long enough to see the truth. You don't need to run anymore, you don't need to smile when it hurts. You don't need to pretend you are light, when you are made of shadows and storms. Because in this strange darkness, something else begins, not joy, not escape, but a strange, fierce clarity, the kind that doesn't flinch, the kind that doesn't bag, the kind that knows, even in silence, even in despair, you are still here, and that is no small thing. The world smiles at you, it tells you to dream, to strive, to win. It dresses itself in beauty, sunsets, music, warm skin, soft voices. But behind this elegance, something moves, something ancient, something without a face. Schopenhauer ripped away that surface. He told us, this world is not guided by reason. It is not held up by meaning. It is driven by a force, cold, restless, unconscious, the will. This will is not your friend. It does not care about your happiness. It does not want you to rest. It does not want you to find peace. It only wants you to want, endlessly. It is the hunger that cannot be satisfied, the itch that cannot be scratched, the silent puppeteer pulling every thread behind your thoughts, behind your ambitions, behind even your love. The will lives in the bird who builds a nest, in the man who builds an empire, in the mother who dies for her child, in the addict who burns his future. It doesn't ask why, it only says, forward, it commends, more. This is the skeleton beneath the beautiful dress, the drive behind every painting, every war, every poem, every scream. The world moves not because it understands, but because it must. You feel this. Even if you can't name it, you wake up, and something pulls you forward. You call it duty, you call it survival, but deep down, it asks the will. Whispering, demanding, always demanding, you chase pleasure, you find it. You lose it, you chase again, you run from pain, you escape, it returns. You run again, you make plans, they collapse. You rebuild, you love, you fear. You hold on, you let go, and none of this ends, because the will never stops. Imagine a horse, galloping full speed in the dark. There is no rider, no destination, only speed, only movement. That is life, said Schopenhauer, a race without a finish line, a thirst with no water, and so, the man who suffers is not broken, he is natural. The woman who weeps is not weak, she is aligned with the truth. Pain is not a glitch in the system, it is the system. You are told that suffering means failure, that sadness means something went wrong, that restlessness is something to medicate. But Schopenhauer said, these are not symptoms, these are signs that you are alive. Think of the flower that grows through concrete, beautiful, yes, but also blind. It grows because it must, not because it knows what is above the surface, not because it seeks sunlight, but because the will inside it says, rise. That same will lives in you, and it doesn't care if you bleed along the way. It only wants you to keep moving. So what then? Is there no peace? No way out? There is, but it is not where you think. You were taught to fight the world, to shape it, to master it. But the truth is, the world cannot be fixed, it cannot be saved. It cannot be bent to your will, because it is the will. Every time you try to force life to obey you, it laughs. Every time you build security, it shakes the ground. Every time you say now I have found it, it takes it away. Peace comes not in dominating the will, but in seeing it, naming it, watching it like a storm that is not yours to stop, only to endure. This is not surrender, it is awakening, because in that moment, when you see the madness for what it is, you stop running, you stop clawing, you stop begging for the world to make sense. And in that pause, in that breath, something opens, not joy, not triumph, stillness. You become like the man who sits on a hill as the world burns below, not because he has given up, but because he no longer believes the fire can be controlled. He sees the skeleton, he knows the dress will fall, and still, he watches, he lives, he breathes. There is freedom in that, not the freedom of the hero, not the freedom of the winner, but the freedom of the witness, the one who sees through the illusion, and does not flinch. The will cannot be killed, but it can be known, and in that knowing, something strange happens. Your suffering loses its edge, your hunger quiets, not because it is fed, but because you finally understand, it was never yours to begin with. You are not the architect, you are the observer. You are not the voice shouting, you are the silence listening. You are not the puppet, you are the one who sees the strings, and that seeing, that bare, brutal honesty, is the beginning of strength. There is a moment when pain becomes unbearable, not because it intensifies, but because it stops pretending. It no longer wears the mask of reason, it no longer knocks politely. It enters you like a tide, like a long-forgotten truth, and for the first time, you feel its clarity. This is despair, but not the kind that drowns, not the dramatic kind, no tears, no breakdown. The quiet kind, the cold, clear realization that nothing you chase will ever silence the ache, that every peak will lead to another climb, that there is no final moment of arrival. And yet, in this bleakness, something rare is born. Despair becomes beautiful when you stop resisting it. When you sit with it, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. When you stop asking it to leave, and instead, ask what it knows. Because despair is not empty, it is full of truth. It tells you what matters. It strips away what doesn't. It reveals how much of your life has been noise, borrowed goals, inherited beliefs, artificial urgency. It burns through illusion like fire through dry leaves. You begin to see what Schopenhauer saw, that the pain is not beneath you. It is the doorway, that to reach any real peace, you must go through the flame. Pain becomes light the moment you stop turning away from it. Imagine a candle burning inside a dark room. It doesn't light the whole space. It doesn't remove the night, but it creates a center, a presence, a heartbeat of light. Your despair is like that. Not a spotlight, but a pulse, and within that pulse, you remember who you are, beneath the masks, beneath the noise. There is something honest in this kind of pain, something sacred. It does not beg, it does not promise, it simply says, this is real. This is what is left when everything else falls away. You think you ray breaking, but you ray becoming whole. You think you ray lost, but for the first time, you are off the path that was never yours. The successful man who feels numb at the top of his career, his despair is not weakness. It is the whisper of truth. The smiling woman who stares into the mirror and sees nothing, her emptiness is not failure. It is the death of the performance, the achiever who cannot rest, the lover who cannot love, the parent who cannot feel joy. All of them are not broken. They are standing at the edge of illusion, and the edge always feels like the end, but it is not the end. It is the invitation, because once you see through the lie that success will save you, that love will complete you, that peace comes from arrival, you begin to ask a different question. You stop searching for what makes life easier, you begin to seek what makes it real. Despair is the beginning of depth. You begin to crave silence, not as escape, but as return. You stop rushing to fix yourself. You start listening to yourself, and in that stillness, pain becomes something else. Not a punishment, not a mistake, but a light, not a light that blinds. A light that reveals. Schopenhauer never promised relief, he didn't offer a cure, but he offered something better, a way to stop lying, a way to walk through suffering with eyes wide open, to feel pain without shame, to name despair without apology, to stand in the dark without pretending to be whole, because only then do you become something else, not perfect, not healed, but honest, and in honesty, you find a strange kind of freedom. The kind that no one can give you, the kind that doesn't need to be earned, the kind that begins when you no longer need your life to feel good in order to feel real. There is beauty in despair, not because it is pleasant, but because it is pure. It burns away the false, it leaves only what matters, and in its wake, what remains is not a weaker you, but a deeper you. Hope sounds gentle, hope sounds human, but hope can also be a chain, polished, pleasant, soft to the touch, yet unbreakable. It binds not your hands, but your mind. You are told that hope is light, that without it, you are lost, but Schopenhauer knew what few are willing to say. Hope is often the prettiest lie. It is the promise that the storm will pass, that the pain will leave, that something better is waiting. It keeps you looking forward so you never see what is here. Hope keeps the will turning. Hope keeps the will alive. It tells you, just a little more, just a little longer. And so you keep chasing, keep building, keep striving, not because you are free, but because you are afraid to stop. But what if you did stop? What if you let the hope burn out, and stayed with what remained? There is a kind of freedom that begins where hope ends, a freedom not based on dreams, but on the absence of them. It is not the freedom of possibility, it is the freedom of truth. Most cannot bear that, because to live without hope sounds like despair. But Schopenhauer saw that beyond despair lies something even deeper. Stillness. The person who has nothing left to wait for is no longer a prisoner of tomorrow. They do not suffer from what they lack, they begin, instead, to see what they already have, not as compensation, but as reality. When you drop hope, you also drop fear. There is no fear of losing when you no longer expect to win. There is no fear of change when you are no longer clinging to permanence. The end of hope does not make you passive, it makes you grounded. Picture a man who stands at the edge of a cliff, not because he plans to jump, not because he seeks thrill, but because he no longer needs to run from the height. He accepts the vastness before him. He does not beg for wings. He stands, he breathes, he does not move. This is not weakness, this is power. It is easy to be brave when you believe everything will work out. It is something else entirely to remain calm knowing it may not. To walk forward knowing there is no safety net. To speak honestly knowing the world may not understand. The world feeds on craving, the will demands it. It needs you to need more status, more security, more meaning. But when you drop the illusion that life owes you something, you become unshakable. You do not give up, you stop asking, you do not surrender, you see clearly. You do not go numb, you feel what is real. Imagine taking off a heavy backpack after years of carrying it. At first, you feel lighter, then you feel bare, then you feel naked. This is what happens when hope dies. At first, there is fear. Then, there is air, room, clarity. You stop performing, you stop explaining, you stop waiting for something to make it all worthwhile. Instead, you begin to live without a reason, not because life is meaningless, but because it is already full. Full of breath, full of silence, full of what is. Schopenhauer saw that the highest form of strength is not in changing the world, but in no longer being shaken by it. The man who can sit in pain without rushing to fix it. The woman who can live without needing her life to look perfect. The soul that can exist without needing a future reward. This is not despair, this is freedom, and this freedom is quiet. It doesn't shout, it doesn't prove, it simply is. There are no fireworks, there are no grand declarations. There is only this moment, clear, undemanding, whole. You learn to walk through the storm without an umbrella, not because you enjoy the rain, but because you no longer fear being wet. You stop telling your story to be admired, you stop justifying your scars, you stop needing the world to validate the path you have walked. And in this nakedness, in this total absence of armor, you find something unbreakable. Not the self you built, not the role you played, but the one who remained after everything else fell away. You do not belong to the world anymore, and strangely, that's when you begin to truly live in it. You eat without guilt, you sit without purpose, you speak without strategy. You exist, not for a reason, but as a fact, and that is where the deepest kind of peace begins. Not as a prize, not as an achievement, but as a consequence of no longer needing anything to happen. You become the eye of the storm, the still point, the witness to life as it is, raw, sharp, fleeting, but real, and the will, that ancient hunger, still moves. The world still spins. People still chase, but you are no longer swept away. You see it. You feel it, but you are not inside it. You do not defeat the will. You outgrow it. There comes a moment when the identity you carried begins to dissolve. Not because something shatters, but because something deep inside quietly lets go. You were never really one thing. You were voices layered on voices. Family expectations, cultural noise, the echoes of survival. You were the child who obeyed, the student who impressed, the adult who performed. And all of it felt like you, until it didn't. Schopenhauer saw this collapse not as a failure, but as a turning. When the will no longer convinces you to play your role, the mask begins to slip. The person you thought you were, the achiever, the lover, the planner, the good one, starts to feel distant. And that distance is not madness, it is awakening. You begin to question every should. You look in the mirror and no longer recognize the image, not because your face has changed, but because your gaze has. You are no longer interested in performing, you are no longer seduced by applause. You no longer believe in the story you once sold yourself. That story was built for survival, it was built so you could belong. So you could move through a world that demanded a costume. But now the costume burns against your skin. Now the lines you've memorized sound hollow. You become silent. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what you would say no longer fits into words. You drift, not because you are lost, but because the map you were using is gone. Others may not understand. They'll ask what is wrong. They'll tell you to cheer up. They'll urge you to get back to yourself. But you know, there is no self to return to. That version of you was never whole. It was a mask held together by duty, image, and fear. And fear, now, has lost its grip. This moment, the moment of no longer being who you were, is sacred. It is not a breakdown, it is a breakthrough. It is the cracking of the shell that never belonged to you. It is the shedding of a name that always felt too small, but it is not painless. You may feel like a ghost in your own life. You may walk through familiar rooms and feel like a stranger. You may speak, but your words don't land. You may smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes. Because transformation doesn't feel like light, it feels like death. And in a way, it is the death of the obedient version. The death of the actor. The death of the one who said yes while screaming no inside. But with that death, something fierce is born, something unscripted. You begin to speak with a voice that trembles, not because it is weak, but because it is real. You begin to move in ways that make no sense, not to others, not even to yourself, but that feel necessary. You begin to love without proving. You begin to live without explaining. You begin to inhabit the body you abandoned long ago, with its aches, its instincts, its raw, unsanitized truth. This new you doesn't seek to be liked, it doesn't ask to be understood. It doesn't try to win, it simply is, and in that simplicity, there is power. Not the power of control, not the power of certainty, but the power of being untouchable, because there is nothing left to defend. You are no longer a brand, no longer a project, no longer a performance. You are the space beneath all of it. You become like the sky, open, vast, indifferent to the passing clouds. You watch thoughts come and go. You watch emotions rise and fall. You feel pain without becoming it. You feel joy without clinging to it. You are not above it. You are not detached. You are simply real, and that reality cannot be bought. It cannot be taught. It must be lived. This is not enlightenment. This is not transcendence. This is just you, no longer pretending, and it may cost you everything. The friendships that relied on your silence, the love that demanded your mask, the job that required your performance. But what remains is true. What remains cannot be lost, because it was never borrowed. It was never built. It was never begged for. It was always there, waiting for the moment when you would stop being what the world asked of you, and become what you always were. Not a name, not a role, but a presence, unrepudiable, unshakable, unfinished. After all the noise, all the striving, all the roles, there is silence. Not the silence of absence, the silence of truth. It arrives quietly, not as an answer, not as a revelation, but as a space. A space where the mind no longer needs to run, where the heart no longer needs to grasp, where the body no longer resists what it feels. This silence is not an escape. It is not numbness. It is not spiritual fluff. It is the moment when the storm ends, and you realize, it was never about the storm. It was about the one who watched it. All along, in this silence, you stop naming things. You stop categorizing every feeling, every moment. You stop dividing life into good and bad, light and dark, right and wrong. You simply allow it to be what it is, chaotic, fragile, beautiful, brutal, and whole. Schopenhauer reached toward this place, not by running from pain, but by walking straight into it, by stripping the human experience down to its rough frame, by admitting that there is no reward at the end of suffering, and that, perhaps, is the reward. To live without needing anything else to happen, to breathe without explanation, to suffer without shame. This silence is not a practice. It is not a technique. It is what rises when there is nothing left to say. It begins when the ego grows tired. When desire burns out, when your mind no longer feeds the story of me and mine. Imagine an old man sitting beneath a tree. He does not meditate. He does not journal. He does not ask for meaning. He simply sits. And in that sitting, the whole universe breathes with him. Not because he conquered life, but because he stopped needing it to be anything other than what it is. This is not passivity, this is presence. You still feel, you still act. You still move through the world, but there is no friction inside you. No scream, no chase, no inner war. You are no longer being pulled apart. You are whole, even when hurting. You are full, even when alone. And in this silence, the will can no longer manipulate you. The hunger still speaks, but you no longer answer. You hear the voice, but it passes through you like wine through an empty house. There is no resistance, there is no fight, there is just clarity. The world continues, chaotic, loud, demanding, but inside you, something has settled. Like water after the storm, like dust after collapse, like the moment after the last note of a song. This silence has no ambition. It doesn't want to fix you. It doesn't want to improve you. It holds you exactly as you are, wounded, wise, unfinished, free. And it asks nothing in return. No smile, no success, no enlightenment. Just your presence. You begin to see others differently. You see past their noise, past their masks, past their performances. You recognize the same ache, the same hunger, the same quiet despair hidden behind perfect smiles. And you no longer need to judge, you no longer need to teach, you no longer need to fix anyone, because you know they are walking the same path, through shadow, through fire, through silence, and they will find it. Or they want tea, and both are okay. You begin to live without resistance. You begin to die a little each day, to your image, to your fears, to your old self, and it does not scare you. Because what grows in the silence is not a new version of you. It is not a cleaner, more successful you. It is a simpler presence. One that listens more than it speaks. One that touches without holding. One that walks without needing to arrive. You are no longer defined by what you do, or what you want, or what you fear. You are defined by nothing, and in that nothing, you are finally free. After all the searching, all the collapsing, all the quiet, there is a light. But it is not the light you expected. It does not save you. It does not carry answers. It does not warm you like a storybook ending. It simply stands still, unmoving, indifferent. It promises nothing. And yet, it is enough. This light is not a goal. It is not a lesson. It is not even hope. It is the soft glow that appears when everything false has burned away. It does not shine to lead you anywhere. It shines because it cannot do anything else. You no longer seek meaning in every shadow. You no longer ask the world to explain itself. You no longer need to believe that everything happens for a reason. Because now you see, the truth does not explain, it reveals. And what it reveals is neither cruel nor kind. It is simply this: you are here. You are breathing, and the world moves, not for you, not against you. It just moves. There is freedom in this. A fierce, quiet freedom that does not lift you above life, but plants you firmly inside it. You begin to walk differently, not faster, not stronger, just more awake. You begin to speak differently, not to impress, not to protect, just to connect. You begin to love differently, not as escape, not as salvation, just as presence. The weight of performance is gone. The fear of being nothing has dissolved, because you have become nothing, and found peace there. There is no need for a shining purpose, no need to be extraordinary, no need to be remembered. You become ordinary, fully, deeply, extraordinarily ordinary. And the light, the one that promises nothing, becomes your companion. It doesn't tell you what is next. It doesn't chase the future. It simply stays, like breath, like earth, like truth, and you, too, stay. You live, you hurt, you laugh, you grieve, but underneath it all, there is silence. And within that silence, there is peace. Not the peace of a life well lived, not the peace of a soul saved. The peace of no longer needing either. This is where the journey ends, not in triumph, not in enlightenment, but in stillness. You do not arrive, you return, to the place beneath all names, to the self before self, to the light that promises nothing and needs nothing in return.